The coffee had gone cold again. Commander Riley Adams stared at the small brown liquid in her cup, while the massive starship hummed around her. 3 months into their deep space survey mission, everything had become routine. Wake up, check reports, scan empty planets, file paperwork, sleep. The galaxy was full of rocks and gas with very few surprises. "Ma'am, we've got something interesting on long-range scanners." Ensign Brooke called from her station near the front of the bridge. Her voice carried the first hint of excitement Riley had heard in weeks. Riley put down her cold coffee and walked over to the scanning station. The main screen showed a small yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. Nothing special about that. Most star systems had planets. But as she looked closer, something caught her attention. "What am I looking at?" "Brooke? Third planet from the star, ma'am. It's showing signs of civilization, but the readings are strange." Brooke touched several buttons on her control panel. "Look at this." The image changed to show a blue and green world covered in white clouds. It looked peaceful and beautiful, like thousands of other habitable worlds they had catalogued. But then, Brooke highlighted something that made Riley's breath catch in her throat. Lines. Massive stone lines that stretched across entire continents. They looked like walls, but they were enormous. Some of them appeared to be hundreds of kilometers long and incredibly thick. From space, they looked like scars cut into the planet's surface. "Are those fortifications?" Riley asked. "That's what our computers think, ma'am, but they're huge, much bigger than anything we've seen from other civilizations at this development level." Brooke brought up more detailed scans. "According to our analysis, the inhabitants are still in early industrial development. They have basic electricity and simple machines, but no space travel capability." Riley studied the images more carefully. The walls weren't random. They formed patterns that looked like they were designed to protect something. Major population centers sat behind multiple layers of these massive stone barriers. Even more interesting, the walls connected to each other, forming networks that spanned entire continents. "How old are these structures?" Riley asked. Brooke checked her readings. "Some of them appear to be thousands of years old, ma'am. The oldest ones might date back to before this species discovered metalworking, but they've been continuously maintained and expanded. There are newer sections built with more advanced materials." Riley felt a chill run down her spine. In all their surveys of primitive worlds, they had never seen anything like this. Most developing civilizations built cities, farms, and basic infrastructure. They didn't spend thousands of years building continent-spanning fortifications. "What kind of species builds walls like this?" she muttered. "Ma'am, there's more." Brooke's voice was now definitely nervous. "I'm detecting extensive underground construction as well. Tunnel systems that appear to connect the major population centers. Some of them go very deep into the planet's crust." The main screen updated to show cross-sections of the planet's underground areas. Riley's eyes widened. The tunnel systems were as impressive as the surface walls. They formed a complete network beneath the planet's surface, with what appeared to be large chambers and facilities built into the underground infrastructure. "It's like they built an entire backup civilization underground," Brooke said quietly. Riley nodded slowly. She had seen many things during her years exploring the galaxy, but this was completely new. The level of preparation and defensive thinking was unlike anything in their databases. "Ma'am, I'm also detecting something else," Brooke continued. "Energy signatures that don't match their apparent technology level. The readings suggest they have access to power sources and materials that shouldn't be available to a pre-spaceflight civilization." "What do you mean?" "Well, some of these underground facilities are showing energy outputs comparable to our own power systems, but according to our scans, they don't have fusion technology or antimatter capabilities. Whatever they're using for power, it's something we haven't seen before." Riley walked back to her command chair and sat down heavily. Every instinct she had developed during 20 years of space exploration was telling her that something was very wrong here. Primitive civilizations didn't build planetary defense networks. They didn't maintain thousand-year construction projects. They certainly didn't develop unknown energy technologies while remaining stuck on their home planet. Brooke, I want detailed scans of everything. Every wall, every tunnel, every energy signature. And I want our communications team to start monitoring their radio transmissions. I need to know what kind of species we're dealing with here. Yes, ma'am. Should I also prepare a first contact package? Riley paused before answering. First contact with primitive civilizations was supposed to be straightforward. Land near a major population center, demonstrate superior technology, offer membership in the galactic community. Most species were excited to learn they weren't alone in the universe. But something about this planet made her hesitate. The massive fortifications suggested a species that thought very seriously about defense. The underground networks implied long-term planning on a scale that was almost unimaginable. The unknown energy sources hinted at capabilities that might be more advanced than they appeared. Not yet, Riley said finally. Let's study them for a while first. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we announce our presence. Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission, announced Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. His voice was surprised. It's coming from the planet. What kind of transmission? Radio waves, but they're directed specifically at our ship. Someone down there knows we're here. Riley felt her heart rate increase. Their ship was cloaked and running silent. Detection by a primitive civilization should have been impossible. Put it on the main speakers. The bridge filled with static, then a clear voice speaking in what their translation computers identified as the dominant language of the planet. Greetings to the vessel currently in orbit around our world. We are the people of Earth. We have been expecting visitors like you for some time. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The bridge fell completely silent. Riley stared at the main screen, her mind racing. Not only had they been detected, but the inhabitants had been expecting them. The implications were staggering. Ma'am, what are your orders? Brooke asked quietly. Riley thought about the massive walls, the underground networks, the unknown energy sources, and now this impossible detection of their cloaked ship. Whatever these humans were, they were much more than they appeared to be. Prepare for first contact, she said finally, but keep our shields up and weapons ready. Something tells me this isn't going to be a standard survey mission. The transmission continued. We would be happy to meet with your representatives on the surface. We have prepared a suitable location for first contact. Please respond when you are ready. Riley looked around the bridge at her crew. Everyone was staring at her, waiting for orders. She had a feeling that whatever happened next would change everything they thought they knew about primitive civilizations. Send a response, she said. Tell them we accept their invitation. The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface felt longer than usual. Commander Riley Adams watched through the small window as they descended through the atmosphere. From up close, the massive stone walls looked even more impressive than they had from orbit. They rose from the ground like mountains, stretching as far as the eye could see in both directions. Landing coordinates confirmed, announced Pilot Martinez from the front of the shuttle. They've marked a clear area about 2 kilometers from what appears to be their main facility. Riley checked her equipment one more time. Standard first. Contact kit. Universal translator, medical scanner, emergency beacon, and a sidearm that she hoped she wouldn't need. Her team consisted of 4 people. Herself, Science Officer Park for technical analysis, Communications Specialist Wright for translation issues, and Security Chief Thompson for protection. As the shuttle touched down, Riley could see vehicles approaching from the direction of the massive wall. They looked primitive, wheeled transport that seemed to run on some kind of chemical fuel. Smoke came from exhaust pipes at the back. It was exactly what she would expect from a pre-spaceflight civilization. But something nagged at her. If these people were so primitive, how had they detected a cloaked starship? The shuttle door opened and Riley stepped out onto alien soil for the first time in months. The air was clean and fresh, with a slight breeze that carried unfamiliar but pleasant scents. The gravity felt comfortable, slightly lighter than Earth normal standards. 3 vehicles had arrived and stopped about 50 meters away. People emerged from them, and Riley got her first look at the species that had built the massive fortifications she had seen from space. They looked remarkably similar to several other humanoid species in the galaxy: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head with 2 eyes and a mouth. They wore simple uniforms that appeared to be made from woven plant fibers. Most carried what looked like basic projectile weapons, chemical-powered firearms that were common among developing civilizations. One figure approached while the others maintained a respectful distance. It was an older female with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in every detail of Riley's team and equipment. "Welcome to Earth," the woman said in clear, understandable speech. "I am Ambassador Margaret Chen. We are pleased to finally meet representatives of the galactic community." Riley felt her first shock. The woman had said, "finally meet," as if this had been planned for a long time, and she had mentioned the galactic community specifically, not just other worlds or visitors from space. "I am Commander Riley Adams of the Galactic Survey Fleet," Riley replied. "We're here to evaluate your world and people for potential membership in our galactic civilization." Ambassador Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Riley feel slightly uncomfortable. It wasn't unfriendly, but it suggested that Chen knew more about this situation than she was letting on. "Of course," Chen said. "We've been preparing for this meeting for quite some time. Would you like to see what we've built here?" "That would be very helpful," Riley replied. "We are particularly interested in learning about your defensive structures. The walls we observed from orbit are quite impressive for your current technology level." Chen's smile widened slightly. "Yes, we're quite proud of our walls. This particular section was completed about 1,200 years ago, though we've made improvements since then. Follow me." As they walked toward the massive stone barrier, Riley activated her scanner and began taking readings. What she saw made no sense. The wall wasn't just stacked stones. It was a complex structure with internal supports, integrated systems, and materials that shouldn't have been available to a primitive civilization. "Ambassador Chen," Science Officer Park interrupted, "our scans show that these stones are fitted together with extraordinary precision. The joints between them are nearly perfect. How did your people achieve this level of construction accuracy?" "Practice," Chen replied simply. "We've had a very long time to perfect our building techniques." They approached what appeared to be an entrance in the wall. Riley estimated that the barrier rose at least 800 meters above them, disappearing into low-hanging clouds. The entrance itself was massive, large enough for several of their shuttles to fly through side by side. But what caught her attention were the gates. They appeared to be made from some kind of metal, but her scanner couldn't identify the material. The metal had a deep, dark color and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "What kind of metal is this?" Park asked, running her scanner over the gate's surface. "We call it deep iron," Chen replied. "It's something we developed specifically for our defensive needs. Very strong, very durable." Riley's scanner was showing readings that made no sense. The metal appeared to have properties that were theoretically impossible. It was harder than diamond, but somehow also flexible. It conducted electricity, but also acted as an insulator. Most strangely, it seemed to interfere with their scanning equipment in ways that suggested some kind of advanced technology. "How do you create this metal?" Riley asked. "Trade secret," Chen said with another unsettling smile. "Perhaps we can discuss it later, after we've gotten to know each other better." They passed through the entrance into the area behind the wall. Riley had expected to see a primitive settlement, basic buildings, simple technology, the usual signs of a developing civilization. Instead, she found herself looking at facilities that wouldn't have been out of place on any advanced world in the galaxy. The buildings were constructed from the same unknown materials as the walls. They were clearly designed for both function and defense, with no windows on the lower levels and thick, reinforced walls. But what impressed Riley most was the level of organization. Everything was laid out according to a precise plan, with clear sight lines, multiple escape routes, and defensive positions built into every structure. "This looks more like a military base than a city," Security Chief Thompson observed. "In a way it is," Chen replied. "We've learned that it's better to be prepared than to be surprised." "Prepared for what?" Riley asked. Chen stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "For visitors who might not have peaceful intentions." The implications of that statement hit Riley like a physical blow. These people hadn't just built defenses against local threats. They had built defenses against visitors from space, against people like her. "Have you had contact with hostile alien species before?" Wright asked. "Not directly," Chen replied. "But we've been watching galactic civilization for quite some time. We've observed what happens to worlds that are unprepared for contact." Riley felt a chill run down her spine. "You've been watching us?" "Not specifically you, Commander Adams. But yes, we've been monitoring galactic activity in this region of space for several thousand years. We know about the Galactic Survey Fleet. We know about first contact protocols. We know about integration, procedures." Chen gestured toward a building that looked like it might be some kind of command center. "We also know what happens to civilizations that refuse integration." The tour continued, but Riley found it difficult to concentrate. Everything she was seeing challenged her understanding of how primitive civilizations developed. The level of preparation, the advanced materials, the obvious long-term planning, none of it fit with what she knew about pre-spaceflight species. But most disturbing was the clear implication that these humans had been studying galactic civilization for, thousands of years, and had decided that they needed to prepare for war. "Ambassador Chen," Riley said finally, "I need to ask you directly. How long have you known about galactic civilization?" Chen stopped walking and considered the question carefully before answering. "Commander Adams, our people have been aware that we are not alone in the universe for approximately 8,000 years. We detected the first signs of advanced civilizations during what you would call our early Bronze Age. Since then, we have been watching, learning, and preparing." "Preparing for what exactly?" "For the day when someone would come to our world and try to make us choose between submission and destruction." Riley stared at the human ambassador, beginning to understand that this first contact was going to be unlike anything in the Survey Fleet's procedures manual. "And what choice have you made?" she asked quietly. Chen's smile was no longer friendly. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards in a very dangerous game. "We've chosen a third option, Commander. We've chosen to make sure that neither submission nor destruction is possible." The elevator descended for what felt like forever. Commander Riley Adams watched the depth counter increase as they dropped deeper and deeper into the planet's crust. 50 meters, 100 meters, 500 meters. The numbers kept climbing, and Ambassador Chen stood calmly beside her as if dropping a kilometer underground was the most normal thing in the world. "How deep does this go?" Science Officer Park asked, watching the counter with obvious nervousness. "This particular shaft goes down about 3 kilometers, Chen replied casually, "though we have some deeper facilities in other locations. This is just one of our standard command centers." Riley tried to process what she was hearing. A standard command center 3 kilometers underground? The engineering required for such construction would challenge even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Yet these humans claim to have built it with primitive technology. The elevator finally stopped, and the doors opened to reveal something that took Riley's breath away. They were standing at the edge of an enormous underground chamber that stretched beyond the range of their lights. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them, supported by massive stone pillars that looked like they could hold up mountains. But it wasn't the size that impressed her most. It was what filled the space. The chamber was a city, a complete underground city with buildings, streets, transport systems, and thousands of people going about their daily activities. The lighting came from sources that Riley couldn't identify. Not electrical, but somehow providing clean, bright illumination throughout the vast space. "Welcome to New Geneva," Chen said, leading them onto a platform that began moving automatically along what appeared to be a transportation rail. "This is one of our smaller underground facilities. We have 43 major cities like this one, connected by high-speed transit systems." Riley activated her scanner and immediately got readings that made no sense. The platform they were riding on was moving at speeds that should have been impossible without advanced magnetic levitation technology. The buildings around them were constructed from materials that her scanner couldn't identify. The power sources driving everything showed energy outputs that rivaled fusion reactors. "Ambassador Chen," Riley said carefully, "our scanners are showing technology that shouldn't exist at your apparent development level. How is this possible?" "What development level do you think we're at, Commander?" Chen asked. "Based on our surface observations, you appear to be in early industrial development. Basic electricity, chemical fuels, primitive manufacturing." Chen laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the vast underground space. "Commander, what you observed on the surface is what we want visitors to see. Our actual development level is somewhat higher." The transport platform carried them through the underground city, and Riley got a closer look at what the humans had built. The manufacturing facilities were particularly impressive. Workers used tools that looked simple, but produced results that were clearly advanced. She watched them shape metals with techniques that seemed to bend the laws of physics, creating materials that her scanner insisted were impossible. "How long have you been building this?" Park asked, staring at a construction site where workers were expanding the city even deeper into the rock. "This particular facility has been under construction for about 2,000 years, Chen replied. "We started it during what you would call our medieval period, but we've been working on the overall project much longer." "What overall project?" Wright asked. "The deep network," Chen said. "Complete underground infrastructure connecting every major population center on the planet, redundant systems, backup facilities, and enough space to house our entire population, if necessary." Riley felt a growing sense of unease. The scale of what Chen was describing was staggering. An entire backup civilization built underground, constructed over thousands of years, all apparently in preparation for contact with galactic civilization. "Why go to such lengths?" she asked. "Because we've seen what happens to unprepared worlds," Chen replied simply. "We've observed 17 different galactic empires rise and fall in this region of space. We've watched hundreds of civilizations be conquered, enslaved, or destroyed because they weren't ready when the visitors arrived." The platform stopped at what appeared to be a central command facility. Through large windows, Riley could see control rooms filled with equipment that looked primitive, but functioned with obvious sophistication. Display screens showed information in symbols that her translator couldn't decode, but the overall setup looked like it could coordinate planetary defense. "This is our monitoring center," Chen explained as they entered the facility. "From here, we track all space traffic within 50 light-years of our system. We know the location, speed, and probable destination of every ship in the region." Riley's blood ran cold. "You've been tracking our ship?" "Of course. We detected your vessel before it entered our system. We've been monitoring your communications, analyzing your technology, and preparing appropriate responses since you arrived." Chen led them to a large display screen that showed a three-dimensional map of local space. Dozens of points of light moved slowly across the display, each one labeled with symbols that Riley's translator was beginning to decode. "These are all galactic survey ships currently operating in this sector," Chen continued. "We know their missions, their capabilities, and their standard procedures. We also know what happens after first contact is established. What do you mean? Security Chief Thompson asked. Standard procedure calls for a 6-month evaluation period, Chen said, reading from what appeared to be an official document. During this time, the target civilization is assessed for integration potential. Civilizations that are deemed suitable are offered membership in the galactic community. Those that refuse are classified as hostile and subjected to appropriate measures. Riley stared at the human ambassador. The document Chen was reading from looked exactly like classified galactic survey fleet procedures, information that should have been available only to senior fleet personnel. How do you have access to our classified procedures? She asked. We've been intercepting and decoding galactic communications for several thousand years, Chen replied, matter-of-factly. Your encryption methods are quite sophisticated, but we've had a lot of time to work on them. The tour continued deeper into the facility, revealing layer upon layer of preparation. Weapon manufacturing areas that produced armaments designed specifically to counter galactic technology, communication centers that could coordinate resistance across the entire planet, storage facilities filled with supplies that could sustain the underground population for centuries. But what impressed Riley most was the obvious level of coordination and planning. Everything they were seeing was part of a single, unified project that had been underway for thousands of years. Multiple generations had worked on this preparation, each one adding to the overall defensive capability. This is incredible, Park said, examining a weapon that looked like a simple projectile launcher, but whose internal mechanisms were more complex than anything in their databases. But surely you realize that modern galactic military forces would overwhelm any planetary defense system? Chen's expression became very serious. Dr. Park, you're thinking like most galactic civilizations. You assume that advanced technology automatically wins conflicts. But advanced technology has weaknesses. The more complex a system is, the more ways it can fail. She led them to another display screen. This one showing detailed analysis of various galactic military technologies. Ship designs, weapon systems, defensive capabilities, all analyzed in extraordinary detail. We've spent centuries studying galactic military doctrine, Chen continued. We know exactly how your forces operate, what they depend on, and where their vulnerabilities lie. We've designed our defenses specifically to exploit those vulnerabilities. What kind of vulnerabilities? Thompson asked, his training as a security officer overriding diplomatic protocol. Chen smiled that unsettling smile again. Every galactic military system depends on the same basic technologies. Controlled gravity for ship propulsion. Quantum computers for navigation and targeting, plasma weapons for offensive capability, energy shields for defense, all very advanced, all very effective against conventional threats. And all vulnerable to the right kind of interference. Gravity. Systems can be disrupted by harmonic resonance. Quantum computers can be crashed by specific electromagnetic pulses. Plasma weapons can be neutralized by magnetic field manipulation. Energy shields fail when their power sources are targeted. Riley felt a chill as she began to understand what Chen was telling her. The humans hadn't just built defenses. They had built defenses specifically designed to counter galactic technology. You're talking about fighting a war against galactic civilization, she said quietly. No, Commander, Chen replied. We're talking about making sure that such a war would be too costly for anyone to consider fighting. The implications were staggering. An entire civilization that had spent thousands of years preparing for contact with galactic powers, not by trying to join them, but by making themselves too dangerous to attack. What do you want from us? Riley asked. Chen considered the question carefully before answering. We want to be left alone, Commander Adams. We want galactic civilization to classify our world as unsuitable for contact and establish a quarantine zone around our system. We want to be forgotten. And if that doesn't happen? Chen's expression became very cold. then galactic civilization will discover that a species with 8,000 years of preparation time can be very creative about defense. The aircraft that transported them to the testing site was unlike anything Commander Riley Adams had seen before. It looked like a simple helicopter with rotating blades, but it flew faster and more smoothly than most advanced spacecraft. The engine made almost no sound, and her scanner couldn't determine what kind of propulsion system it was using. "We call this the Whisper Bird," Ambassador Chen explained as they flew over endless stretches of desert. "It uses principles that we developed specifically for reconnaissance and transport missions. Very quiet, very efficient." Riley watched the landscape pass below them. The desert looked empty and barren, but her scanner was picking up energy signatures, scattered across a wide area. Whatever the humans had built out here, it was big and well hidden. "Where exactly are we going?" Science Officer Park asked. "To our primary testing facility," Chen replied. "We call it Range 7. It's where we test new defensive technologies and train our personnel for various scenarios." "What kind of scenarios?" Security Chief Thompson asked. Chen's smile was becoming familiar, and Riley had learned that it usually meant bad news. Scenarios involving contact with hostile galactic forces. The aircraft began to descend toward what appeared to be a small collection of buildings in the middle of nowhere. But as they got closer, Riley could see that the buildings were just the visible part of a much larger facility. Her scanner showed extensive underground construction and energy sources that rivaled a small city. They landed on a concrete pad next to what looked like a simple communications building. But when they entered the structure, Riley found herself in a sophisticated command center that could have coordinated military operations across multiple star systems. "Welcome to Range 7, announced a tall man in a simple uniform as they entered. "I'm General Roberts, Facility Commander. Ambassador Chen has asked us to provide a demonstration of our defensive capabilities." Roberts led them to a large observation window that looked out over the desert. In the distance, Riley could see structures that looked remarkably similar to standard Galactic Survey Fleet installations. Mock-ups of their own technology, built by people who had never seen the real thing up close. "Those targets represent typical galactic military installations," Roberts explained. "Command centers, weapon platforms, shield generators, all built to the exact specifications that we've observed through our monitoring activities." "How accurate are these reproductions?" Park asked. "Extremely accurate," Roberts replied. "We've had thousands of years to study galactic technology. We know exactly how your systems work, what materials they're made from, and what their operational parameters are." Riley felt uncomfortable looking at perfect reproductions of her own civilization's military technology built by people who had been planning to fight against it for millennia. "What kind of demonstration are you planning?" she asked. "We're going to show you what happens when galactic military technology encounters our defensive systems," Roberts said. He spoke into a communication device. "Control, this is General Roberts. Authorization code Alpha 77. Begin demonstration sequence 1. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The targets in the distance sat quietly under the desert sun. Then Riley began to notice a low vibration in the floor beneath her feet. "What's that?" Wright asked. "Harmonic resonance generators," Roberts explained casually. "We discovered that all materials have specific frequencies that cause structural failure. We learned to generate those frequencies using purely mechanical systems." The vibration grew stronger, and Riley could see dust beginning to dance on the surfaces around them. Through the observation window, she watched as the mock galactic installations began to shake. "This is impossible," Park said, checking her scanner. "You can't generate enough resonance to affect structures that size using primitive mechanical systems." "Dr. Park, you're still thinking in terms of your technology," Roberts replied. "You use complex systems to generate small amounts of very precise energy. We use simple systems to generate enormous amounts of focused energy." The demonstration escalated quickly. The structures in the distance began to shake apart as the harmonic resonance found their natural frequencies. Materials that should have been able to withstand orbital bombardment crumbled like sand castles as the precise vibrations attacked their molecular bonds. But that was just the beginning. "Control, initiate electromagnetic pulse sequence," Roberts commanded. Riley's scanner immediately began showing interference. The display flickered, then went completely dark. Around the command center, several pieces of equipment shut down completely. "Our systems are being affected," Thompson reported, trying to restart his equipment. "Yes," Roberts said. "We've learned to generate electromagnetic pulses that can disable any electronic system. The frequencies are specifically tuned to disrupt galactic quantum computing systems." Through the observation window, Riley watched as mock galactic shield generators flickered and died. Weapon systems that should have been capable of leveling cities shut down completely. Communication arrays that could coordinate fleets across star systems went silent. "How are you generating this kind of interference?" Park asked, her voice tight with concern. "Simple induction coils powered by mechanical energy systems," Roberts replied. "Very reliable, very effective, and completely immune to electronic countermeasures." The demonstration continued for over an hour. Riley watched defensive technologies that she had never imagined being used to systematically destroy mock-ups of her own civilization's most advanced military equipment. Projectile weapons that used magnetic acceleration to achieve velocities that could penetrate any known armor. Directed energy systems that could overload plasma weapons and cause them to explode. Gravity manipulators that could disable ship propulsion systems from planetary distances. "This is all very impressive," Riley said finally. "But these are just mock-ups. How do you know these techniques would work against real galactic military forces?" Roberts and Chen exchanged a look that made Riley's blood run cold. "Control, bring up the live targets," Roberts said into his communication device. The view through the observation window changed, showing a different section of the desert. In the distance, Riley could see something that made her heart stop. 3 ships that looked exactly like Galactic Survey fleet vessels sat on the sand, apparently disabled. "Those are real ships," Thompson said, staring through the window. "Yes," Chen replied. 3 survey vessels that entered our system over the past 50 years. We've been using them to test our defensive systems." Riley felt sick. "What happened to their crews?" "They were given the same choice we're offering you," Roberts said. "Report that our world is unsuitable for contact or become permanent residents of our testing facility. You're holding galactic citizens prisoner." "We're protecting our world from invasion," Chen corrected. "Every ship that enters our system without permission becomes a potential threat. We've learned to neutralize threats very effectively." The demonstration reached its climax when Roberts activated what he called the final solution, a system that generated gravitational distortions capable of tearing apart any spacecraft within planetary orbit. "We've spent 2,000 years perfecting gravitational manipulation," Roberts explained as Riley watched readings that suggested the desert was generating its own artificial gravity field. "We can destabilize ships, disrupt faster than light, travel, and even affect stellar bodies if necessary." "You're talking about star-killing weapons," Riley said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're talking about making sure that any force sent against our world would face costs too high to justify the attack," Chen replied. Riley looked around the command center at the displays showing weapons systems that could challenge entire galactic fleets, at personnel who had trained their entire lives to fight against superior technology, at a civilization that had turned their entire world into a fortress. "Why are you showing us this?" she asked. "Because you're going to return to your fleet and report what you've seen," Roberts said. "You're going to tell them that Earth is populated by a dangerous, unpredictable species with access to weapons that could threaten galactic stability. And then they're going to classify our system as a restricted zone and forget we exist," Chen added. "Which is exactly what we want." Riley realized that she was looking at the most successful defensive strategy she had ever encountered. The humans hadn't tried to match galactic technology. Instead, they had made themselves too dangerous to attack and too unpredictable to trust. "What if the Galactic Council decides that you're too dangerous to be left alone?" she asked. Chen's smile was no longer unsettling. It was terrifying. "Then they'll discover that we've spent 8,000 years preparing for that possibility too." The flight back to the main facility was conducted in complete silence. Riley stared out the window at the desert, knowing that beneath that empty landscape was a defensive network that could hold off any conceivable attack. For the first time in her career, she was beginning to understand that there were some civilizations that were better left undiscovered. The final meeting took place in a chamber that dwarfed everything Commander Riley Adams had seen during her time on Earth. The Global Command Center was built inside a natural cavern system 5 kilometers beneath the planet's surface, but the humans had expanded it into something that defied imagination. The main chamber could have housed several star destroyers side by side. The walls were lined with displays showing defensive positions across the entire planet, real-time tracking of space traffic throughout the local sector, and status reports from underground facilities scattered across every continent. "Impressive, isn't it?" Ambassador Chen said as they walked across the vast floor. "This facility has been our primary coordination center for the past 4,000 years. From here, we can manage planetary defense operations, coordinate deep space monitoring, and maintain communication with our off-world observation posts." Riley stopped walking. "Off-world observation posts? Did you think we were content to just watch from our home system?" Chen asked with that familiar, unsettling smile. "Commander, we've had monitoring stations throughout this sector of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Small, hidden facilities that track galactic military movements and technological developments." Riley felt the floor drop out from under her understanding of the situation. "You have faster-than-light travel?" "We have several different methods of interstellar travel," Chen replied casually. "None of them match galactic technology for speed or efficiency, but they're much harder to detect. We prefer stealth over speed." They walked toward the center of the chamber, where a massive 3-dimensional display showed the entire local region of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were mapped in perfect detail, with real-time information about fleet movements, trade routes, and military installations. "This is our strategic overview," Chen explained. "Every galactic vessel within 200 light-years of Earth is tracked and analyzed. We know their missions, their capabilities, their command structures, and their probable responses to various scenarios." Science Officer Park stared at the display in amazement. "The amount of data processing required for this would challenge our most advanced computers." "Dr. Park, we don't use computers the way galactic civilization does," Chen said. "We use biological, neural networks enhanced with quantum processing crystals. Much more reliable, much harder to disrupt with electronic warfare." Riley walked closer to the central display and saw something that made her blood freeze. Red markers indicated the positions of every Galactic Survey fleet vessel in the sector, including her own ship currently in orbit above them. "You're tracking all of our ships in real time," she said. "Of course. We're also monitoring your communications, analyzing your technology, and preparing appropriate responses to every possible action your fleet might take." Chen touched a control surface, and the display zoomed in to show Riley's ship in perfect detail. "We know exactly how many people are aboard, what weapons you carry, and what your operational orders require you to do next." Security Chief Thompson stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Are you threatening us?" "Not at all," Chen replied calmly. "We're simply making sure you understand the situation completely before you make your report to the Galactic Council." General Roberts appeared beside them, apparently having arrived through one of the many entrances to the vast chamber. "Commander Adams, your ship has been attempting to communicate with Galactic Fleet Command for the past 6 hours. Your messages are being blocked by our communication interference systems. Riley felt a chill of fear. You're jamming our communications? We're managing information flow, Roberts corrected. No word of our capabilities will reach galactic civilization until we're ready for it to be received. Chen led them to a raised platform that provided a better view of the entire command center. From this vantage point, Riley could see thousands of personnel working at stations throughout the chamber. The level of coordination and organization was impressive, but what struck her most was the obvious military discipline of everyone involved. This isn't just a defensive installation, she realized. This is a military command structure. Commander Adams, our entire civilization has been organized for defense for 8,000 years, Chen said. Every citizen receives military training. Every facility serves both civilian and defensive purposes. Every decision is made with planetary security in mind. You've militarized your entire species? We've prepared our entire species, Chen corrected. There's a difference between militarization and preparation. We're not interested in conquest or expansion. We're interested in survival. Roberts activated another display that showed Earth's ID defensive network in its entirety. Riley stared at a planet that had been turned into the most formidable fortress she had ever imagined. Surface installations, underground facilities, orbital platforms, and deep space monitoring stations, all connected into a single integrated defense system. Every major galactic power has tried to expand into this sector at some point over the past few millennia, Roberts explained. The hegemony, the Trade Federation, the warrior clans, the machine intelligence, all of them sent scouts and survey teams to evaluate local systems for conquest or exploitation. What happened to them? Wright asked. They decided that this region of space wasn't worth the cost of occupation, Chen replied. After their initial survey teams failed to report back, they classified the entire sector as a navigation hazard and established exclusion zones. Riley began to understand the full scope of what the humans had accomplished. They hadn't just defended themselves against individual threats. They had systematically convinced multiple galactic powers that this entire region of space was too dangerous to be worth exploring. You've been doing this for thousands of years, she said, making galactic civilizations think this area is too dangerous to approach. It works very well, Roberts said. Galactic powers are usually interested in easy conquests and profitable expansions. When the cost of expansion becomes too high, they look elsewhere. Chen walked to the central control station and activated a final display. This one showed something that took Riley's breath away completely. It was a star map showing the entire galaxy, with markers indicating the locations of every major galactic civilization, their military capabilities, their expansion patterns, and their technological limitations. Commander Adams, we've been watching. Galactic civilization developed for 8,000 years, Chen said. We've observed the rise and fall of dozens of different empires. We've studied their technologies, their strategies, their weaknesses, and their eventual collapse patterns. Every galactic civilization follows the same basic development path, Roberts added. Rapid technological advancement, aggressive expansion, military overextension, and eventual collapse due to the inability to maintain control over vast territories. Riley stared at the display, seeing her own civilization's expansion marked in clinical detail. Territory acquired, resources exploited, species conquered or integrated. From the human perspective, galactic civilization looked less like a community of advanced species and more like a recurring pattern of expansion and collapse. What do you want from us? She asked finally. Chen considered the question carefully. We want you to report that Earth is unsuitable for contact. Dangerous inhabitants, unstable technology, potential threat to galactic security. We want your fleet to establish a quarantine zone around our system and mark it as off-limits to all galactic traffic. And if we refuse, then you'll become permanent residents of our world, Roberts said matter-of-factly, along with the crews of 15 other survey vessels that have visited our system over the past century. Riley felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. She was looking at a civilization that had spent millennia preparing for this exact moment. They had anticipated every possible response, planned for every contingency, and built defenses that could challenge any force that might be sent against them. "You're asking us to lie in our official report," she said. "We're asking you to help us maintain the peace," Chen replied. "Commander, your civilization is following the same expansion pattern as dozens of others we've observed. Within a few centuries, you'll overextend yourselves and begin to collapse. When that happens, you'll withdraw from frontier regions like this one and focus on protecting your core systems. But if you force a confrontation now, if you try to integrate our world into your galactic community, the cost will be enormous for everyone involved," Roberts added. "Better to wait for natural historical forces to take their course." Riley looked around the command center one more time at the displays showing defensive capabilities that could challenge entire fleets, at personnel who had trained their entire lives for galactic warfare, at a civilization that had turned isolation into the ultimate defensive strategy. "I'll need to discuss this with my crew," she said finally. "Of course," Chen replied. "But Commander, I should mention that time is somewhat limited. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected a significant increase in galactic military activity in this sector. It appears that your fleet command is becoming concerned about the number of survey vessels that have failed to report back from frontier regions." The implication was clear. If Riley didn't convince her superiors to stay away from Earth, larger military forces would eventually be sent to investigate. And the humans were prepared for that possibility too. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Our projections suggest that a major galactic task force will reach this sector within 6 months, Roberts said. "Unless, of course, they receive reports indicating that there's nothing here worth investigating." Riley nodded slowly, beginning to understand that she was being offered a choice between a peaceful cover-up and an interstellar war that would cost both sides more than anyone could afford. "I'll send the report," she said quietly. Chen smiled, and for the first time since Riley had met her, the expression seemed genuinely friendly. "Thank you, Commander. We appreciate your wisdom." As Riley and her team were escorted back to their shuttle, she couldn't help but marvel at what the humans had accomplished. They had solved the ultimate problem facing any primitive civilization contacted by advanced galactic powers. They had made themselves too dangerous to conquer and too costly to ignore, while maintaining the appearance of being too primitive to matter. It was, she realized, the perfect defense, and it had been 8,000 years in the making.